So I think I'm sharing the screen, hopefully. Yep, says I'm sharing a screen. This recorded. We're LAN 2. And I wanted to review some troubleshooting on permissions. So I can troubleshoot permissions in server because you have two sets of permissions to worry with, share and Ntfs permissions. And then you run into the problem of, what if you're a member of 4 or 5 different groups? So you can run into that problem is, how do the group memberships and the permissions assigned to different groups on a folder or file, how do they all combine and affect? That can be a little bit tedious. You can write it all out and try to calculate it yourself by hand. Windows Server has the ability to do that. And they built in a tool to solve that so that you no longer have to write everything out by hand. Used to be how we did it 20 years ago. So let's go into our server manager. Let's look at the shares that we have on server 3. So you want to figure out, what does Bob Minion have to public or to deploy? Let's look at techniques that Microsoft has implemented. So if you go to properties of that folder share, we go under permissions. And you customize your permission. And this is a dialog box that we can look. A couple of things we can examine is, who's the owner? It's shown right here. Who owns that? The owner has the most power over an object, typically. So we, the administrators group, owns it. It's the only time I believe a group that I've ever been able to see has ownership of an object, is the administrators group. Any other owner has to be a single user and not a group. Kind of makes sense, but Microsoft hard-coded into their operating system where the administrators group could actually own files, but no other group can. Let's look at effective permissions. This is the tab where that you can do your troubleshooting at. So it allows you to view the permissions based on user accounts or groups, memberships, or device account. So I can select a particular user or group to include in my report. And I want this to be Bob Minion. And I can also associate a device for Bob Minion. So the device has to be able to be contacted, because it'll send the command and have the device contact back to it. So let's select the device. Let's put Bob's workstation in the mix. So select both the device that the user is going to be accessing the share through and the user account that's going to be accessing that share. This will allow us to run a view effective access. We'll try to compute that access. We may have some issues with client 1 having a firewall on it, so we'll see. If this doesn't go through, you might possibly have to disable firewall on the device. That way the communications can go through. So RPC server is unavailable. Let's go to client 1, and this would be the easiest for lab purposes. Let's go into client 1 and disable the firewall. I'm going to log on as administrator. That way I have rights. To temporarily disable the firewall to run this test. So it takes a moment to build the profile. I haven't logged in, I guess, or I haven't. This is the domain admin. So open up, go to Ethernet, click on Windows Security, domain firewall, Windows Defender firewall for the domain. I'm going to turn that off. So I just turned it off for the domain. That way I can communicate. Going back to server 1 and rerunning the effective permission should give me access this time with the firewall off. We may still have some troubleshooting to do. But that should have solved our issue. It's still throwing an issue. Let me turn it off for all of them. Sometimes even if you join a domain, the network adapter will attach to one of the other firewall, like public or private, even though you're logged into the domain. I've seen this happen before. Just a glitch with Microsoft. We're still having some issues. All right, let's do some more. Okay, so with some troubleshooting, it looks like the net log on for server 3 may be the issue because that's client is doing good. So I go to group policy and checked out the firewall policy for server 3. They were trying to check the effective permissions on. So if you go in and computer configuration policies, Windows settings, security settings, and find Windows Defender firewall, inbound rules, scroll down to the net logon service. It was unchecked. I have went in and modified, enabled the rule, and under advanced, enabled it only for domain level. And allowed the connection. So with that turned on, we have to run a GP update on server 3 or to pull that rule. We'll see if that solves our issue. That did solve the issue pretty quickly. I want to experiment and turn the firewall back on client and see if client may not have been an issue at all. So restored settings on the client machine. I'll re-click view effective permissions. So the client machine was not what was blocking us. So looking at the effective permissions, full control is being blocked by share permission and file permissions both. Write attributes are by file permissions. Delete subfolders and files is being blocked by share and file permissions. Change permissions, notice, is only being blocked by share. That can be useful. If you're trying to change permissions on a folder or file, that lets you know which permission is blocking you. Is it the Ntfs permissions tab right here? Or is the share permissions tab? In this case, share permissions tab is what's blocking that access. We modify share permissions to read only. And view the effective permissions again. I forgot to hit apply. There we go. So hit apply.
Where did you switch the firewall in over on the group policy?
On the servers, organizational unit.
The firewall policy.
Yep. So look what read only gives me. Even though Bob Minion is supposed to have access on the permissions tab to create files, because I went to the share tab and I took away the change right and left read only, I'm now seeing that if I'm accessing the share from client 1 as Bob, hitting the public share, write data, create folders and stuff is being blocked by share permission. Change permissions being blocked by share permissions. Along with delete and some of those others out there is being blocked by the share permission. Share permissions hit first. So that's why it's listed first. Share is blocking. So I'll go back and fix that. Give everyone change again. Apply it. So a lot more green checkboxes. This is useful. Like I said, if you are not getting the correct permission, you can first determine if something, where it's being blocked at. And like if it says share, then you know that, hey, I only need to go to the share tab and fix it. If it says only file permission, then you know that file permission is what's being blocked. And if it has both, well, you need to expand the permission on both of them be able to gain access. Enable what?
The RPC.
Okay,
There were two RPCs that occurred. And there's two net logons you can give us.
let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's go to Active Directory users and computers and create a new group. So last semester, remember, you pretty much just only use domain local or domain global groups. And I recommend using domain to designate their name followed by what they are. So I'm going to have domain minions out there as a global group. It'll be a security group. Rarely do you change those radio buttons down there at the bottom. Unless you've got a multi-domain environment, you likely are not going to need universal groups or domain local groups getting into your mix. If you have a multi-domain environment, you need to research the 3 different group scopes and how they interact with each other in much, much more detail. But you're not an administrator trying to configure an enterprise multi-domain environment right now. So trying to train that, you won't retain if I'd go over all of those. Now, if you add that environment, it would make some sense because you're probably struggling with group memberships and how to get permissions to different people. So we're just going to stick with global groups are used to organize users. And you can apply permissions. It makes it pretty simple to just stick with that in single domain environments. There's some best practices and stuff there. Microsoft said this is not quite a best practice, but let's go ahead and put all these people, add to group. Go and add them to domain minions. So hopefully you remember you can highlight your users, right click, add a group, type the group name. It's a quick way to get them all into the group membership. You can alternatively go to the group members tab and add each user individually, but that's slow. So using my control key and clicking on the users and adding to groups, the fast and I would say preferred way to do that. So creating this group for a specific purpose, we're going to play with deny permissions. So Bob is a member of domain minions. Bob is also a member of domain users. I'll give you all some time. Some of you are still adding the group. Let's go back to the public folder share. Let's get to the Ntfs permissions tab. And let's say that your boss said you want everybody to be denied access to the public folder except for the minions. And they need to be able to create files and edit each other's files in that folder. So you as a good person, they said, deny all the users. Let's go add domain minions. We'll go ahead and give them just write capability plus read only. And you remember the read only is read and execute. But your boss said, go into users and deny them rights. Let's go ahead and edit the users here. And let's change it to deny. Let's deny everything. Hit OK. And apply. So you get a warning here. I think I want to click no on that. I'm going to go back and edit, and I'm going to actually set deny for modify instead of for control. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and apply. So it didn't throw a fit on that. It was throwing a fit because you're an administrator and you're also part of users, and you're going to deny yourself rights to the folder.
It got rid of minions.
So let me re-add the main minions in here. Well, I'll put them back in there. I had the deny right first. Let's get it fixed. Let's go back to allow for a second. This is why you don't use deny.
Just completely remove server 3 users and out back.
Not sure why I accidentally clicked something. There we go. So I want to go back and I want to add this back as a deny right. Why not? Okay. Apply. Sure.
So we're still on deny users or users?
And I've got dominions allowed. I got users denied. Remember, Bob's a member of the main minions. You go to effective permissions and we go ahead and select the user, Bob, and the device client. Can't spell client. View effective permissions. So what does Bob have? He doesn't have any rights, and it's caused by file permissions. But you go look at Bob and you're like, well, he's a member of domain minions, and domain minions have read, write, and execute. What's wrong? He's also an everybody. Users is everybody too. So he's a member of both groups. And deny rights are always read first. If you've implemented access control list in a Cisco firewall or something, and if you deny everything, and if the deny all is at the top, that's always going to be read first. And as soon as a true matching is hit, it stops processing access control list. Permissions are also an access control list. So they're rule-based, and any type of rule-based permissions that are read like this in a listing collection, the denies, notice it auto put it at the top. So they visually try to order it for you. Some older versions of Windows don't order them in the right order, but deny is always read first. If you want to give only domain minions access, then instead of using deny rights, remove the group that you don't want to have access to something. If I go back and check effective permissions now, Bob has rights to the folder. But anybody else that was not in domain minions wouldn't have rights. So it's real easy to take away everybody's rights to a folder. Take away the users. Don't use deny. You've seen it cause some havoc. Also, don't mess with the everyone group under share, because that can also cause some problems. So you lock it down on permissions tab, and don't worry about everyone having full control, because it's controlled over here. You took it by users, so users don't have rights. If you try to go over here, instead of putting everyone and you added in domain minions there definitely could be a chance in the future that another department needs access to the folder. And you just go over here and give the other group access to the folder, and they still can't get access to it, and you don't know what's going on because you forget to check the share permissions. And that's the number one flaw that I see people have with permissions. So they keep on messing with the permissions tab, trying to give the other group rights to it, and they end up giving them full control and not understanding why they don't have rights. They finally, maybe at one point in time, mess with something over here, and all of a sudden they got rights to it. Now they accidentally have full control to everything because they don't go back and lock down this permission. Like, we just kept having to add and add and add permission until they finally got rights to it. Now they have rights, so we're just going to leave it alone. But they've inadvertently gave rights to everybody or anonymous users and everything to the system. And that's why this is always the answer to share, is to stop that type of just keep adding and adding permissions. So you will go down that rabbit hole if you don't have everyone set to change, administrators set to full, or you've implemented a deny right. The only time that I would implement a deny right is if a particular user or a particular application running as a service account is deleting a file for some reason, maybe a flaw in the coding or maybe a flaw in the person's mental state, and they keep deleting a file. The only time that I'd actually do So I don't have rights to this file because I accidentally threw deny right on it. What do? How do I get that rights back? I could take control of it. I'm sure y'all have some of these. So I took ownership. This is good troubleshooting. Can you get access to these files you no longer have access to? So now I can. I had to take ownership of it. When I originally applied to deny, notice the users here have deny. I can go ahead and remove users out of there. Maybe. What does it say? I need to break inheritance. There we go. Broken inheritance recovered. Can you do that to the files? Try it. Can you recover and gain access back to it and remove the deny right? Look what I had to do. I had to go into the properties of the file, the security tab. Nobody has rights. This might possibly happen because you gave everyone full control, share rights, and a user is able to go in and play with the deny permission and deny you and everybody rights to a file. That's why we only use everyone change instead of everyone full to stop users from accidentally trying to implement a deny right. Because they normally implement it wrong. And then this happens. Nobody can access it, not even you, although you're the admin. So you got some cool powers that you can do because you're admin. One of those powers is, like I said, taking ownership of the file itself. So I took ownership of the file itself, going to server 3, and I use the administrators group because it's the only one that you can actually use as a group. I could use administrator to take ownership, or I could use any other user account that had administrative rights to take ownership. But as far as group wise, administrators is the only group that I could type. If I tried to type Bob Minion here, it would this doesn't make sense. You can't make Bob Minion group a member of a file. So take ownership, hit apply, hit OK, OK, because now that you've got ownership, it's got to reload the dialog box and go back into properties security. These are grayed out, meaning they're being inherited. So I have to break inheritance. Then I can remove that deny right off the system. So it's kind of a multi-step process there to get deny right off. That's why you don't want to play with it. It causes major issues. And LAN 1 and all this part of LAN 2, I've always been saying, hey, that's the permission. That's why that makes mandatory access control. Users cannot use a deny right. Because trust me, that will happen. There'll be some user out there just looking at stuff and reading like, oh, I want to deny Susie over here rights to the file, and they inadvertently deny everybody because they think they know what they're doing. They don't. Okay, so resume recording after break. believe I've gone over about everything I wanted to cover today.
We're recording? Oh,
Yeah,
he's still not back?
we're back recording, so
He was on the road today, so he wasn't wasn't going to be able to zoom in. That's why he's not here.
I did want to point out, did anybody look at these links? So
Right, what are you talking about?
this one gives a good explanation of NTFS versus share permissions. Just an extra read. What is NTFS permissions, the history of it, 1993 onwards. Old FAT that had no permissions at all, way back in the day. So it gives a good read through if you need some extra black and white print on stuff. And then they talk about share permissions, and the main part of this is kind of showing when you have share and NTFS permissions, what does the user actually have access to. So in this case, you have full control on the NTFS permission, but the share permission is set to read, because that's the highlighted one. What is the user's effective permission? It's read. It's the most restrictive between the two. Again, if you had full control on share and you have read only on NTFS, it's still just read, because read's the most restrictive. So a couple of pictures there. I should have had some more examples and pictures like that. Because this scenario down here, if you had another group that had full control, then the effective permission for that other group would be full control. Be cool, except for up here. It doesn't matter that you have full control. If you're blocked on the share permission, you're read no matter what. But the other scenario, full control on share, the doorway's open, you get read for that group, but if second group had full control, you'd have full control, because full control to full control, it's all the way through.
It just goes with the most restrictive.
Yes. And if the first one's the most restrictive, it doesn't matter what you do on the second part. However, if the first one's the least restrictive, then it matters on the second part. That's why you always have share opened up and the NTFS permission locked down. So that's what we've showed you. And that's this read. Here are some best practices. A bunch of suggested readings. A bunch of other people talking about it. So definitely two good links. They have some black and white read other than what my voice and us just clicking through in the class. Good ones to take with you. Okay, so the rest of the class period, I've seen another person, looks like they finished this chapter and test out, but I give the rest of the class period. We got about 35 minutes class left. You have some time for working on test out. Also that chapter 5 and security class being ginormous. Because I kind of want to hack Windows 10 today in class. So we want to spend a little bit of time hacking something in class this afternoon.